Good afternoon, everyone. As Anne mentioned, my name is Patricia Gomez. I'm the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer from Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience and the Director of Energy. And I have a spectacular panel here lined up with so much expertise that goes from vehicles to buses to many other things. So we are going to have a very, very interesting conversation. But before I ask everybody to introduce themselves, I wanted to talk a little bit about Miami-Dade County. Perhaps you have heard in previous presentations today a little bit about our operations. We have around 175 electric buses in order in place, and currently we are using 53 electric buses on our service area. And the County Department of Solid Waste, it also purchased its first electric garbage truck in 2022. So it's across the portfolio of Miami-Dade County that we are electrifying. On the live fleet, as of January, we had 41 electric vehicles that are being used, and many, many more purchased or ordered. We definitely are facing the issue that we cannot order as many vehicles as that we needed, as many electric vehicles, and that has been putting a little bit of slowing us down. We have around charging stations for fleet at 9 locations. And then for public charging, we have 14 ports at 4 downtown garages. And of course, many, many more coming in the near future. In addition to that, I want to mention that we have been supporting compact transit-oriented developments in our planning, the implementation of the rapid transit corridors, and the SMART program that you have heard today, the mayor mentioned, which is very, very important to us in Miami-Dade County. So the way we are going to have the panel is we are going to have quick introductions, and then I have a few questions that I wanted to ask them, and then we'll open it up for the questions of the public. So with that, let me start with introductions. Should we start with Crystal, the ladies first?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody. Crystal Stiles, Executive Director of Development for Distributed Technologies and Mobility at Florida Power and Light Company. Florida Power and Light is a subsidiary of NextEra Energy, which is the world's largest generator of renewable energy from the wind and the sun, and we're the largest electric utility in Florida. And my team really focuses on holistic charging solutions. So whether it's public fast charging to ensure that travelers feel confident adopting electric vehicles, or home charging solutions, we're looking at fleet electrification and many other solutions for, as Floridians electrify. So really excited for this conversation this morning with you.
Hello, my name is Emily Yates. I am Chief Innovation Officer with the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, also fondly known as SEPTA. I cover within the innovation department. I oversee data analytics and policy as well as sustainability, and I'm working to stand up a pure innovation pillar where we can quickly pilot technology based on challenge-based procurement. Just a little background on SEPTA. We are the 5th largest transportation authority in the United States. We cover, as our name says, southeastern Pennsylvania, which is 5 counties, but we also connect to Delaware and New Jersey transportation systems as well. And I will just leave it at, we have over 2,800 vehicles within our fleet. 1,500 of those, almost 1,500 of those are buses. With our next round of buses that we get in, which is approximately 150 each year, we will be fully hybrid diesel electric, which is the first step of our transition to fully going zero emission vehicles. And also excited for this conversation.
Hello, my name is Andres Jaramillo. I'm the CEO of BG Mobility. BG Mobility is a company that deploys electric buses and full infrastructure solution for public transport authorities. We started operations in Latin America. This is something that many people don't know, but Bogota, Colombia, and Santiago de Chile are the cities outside of China with more electric buses running today in the world. So Bogota has 1,500 buses running today in the operation. We have 406 of those. And Santiago de Chile has nearly 2,000 buses already running. We have 446 buses in total that have been running for more than, I don't know, 13 million miles at the moment and for 3 years. And they work perfectly. And it's a good idea to move into electric and do the transition quickly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro Burgana. I am the co-founder and managing director of OBE Power. Our mission is to accelerate the transition to clean and efficient e-mobility. And we do that by developing and implementing the concept of electric vehicle charging as a service, or EVCAS. What that is that we pretty much remove all the pain and all the upfront and operational barriers and cost to potential convenient locations where those are pretty much urban locations where most people live, work, play, and learn. So with that, we maximize the benefit, and that novel concept, over the last 6 years, allow us to get plenty of tractions both with the public and the private sector, to the point that we now have the second largest owned and operated charging network in the state, and also, as per recent reports from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, the 15th largest in the country. So we keep expanding this model. There is plenty of traction and opportunity for growth, and the idea is to continue presenting this solution to more cities, more municipalities, and of course, the private sector, corporations, developers, rental communities, condominiums, and whatever people actually need to have a charging solution close to them, because the purpose here is not for people to pretty much go to a central depot location where you have like hundreds of chargers, but actually to bring the charging solution close to where you live, where you work, so the vehicle is charging where you are living your lifestyle and continuing with that lifestyle.
Thank you. So just to know a little bit about who you are, right? So who is here from the public sector? Raise your hand. Okay, private sector. Awesome. Any educational institutions here? Non-for-profit organizations? Anybody that I haven't mentioned? Okay, and you all came on your bike today, right? No? Shuttle, good. Electric vehicle. How many use your electric vehicle? Awesome. Okay, so the scooter? The scooter, anybody in the scooter? And running? I don't know. Do we have a runner in the house? Okay, so the first question that I have for the panel is, how are you electrifying on a massive scale? And I'm going to start with Andres, because he's going to be talking about designing, building, and operating depots for electric vehicles. And so, Andres, I'll give you the
Patricia,
word now.
thanks. Yes, we have in Bogota 3 operations. As I mentioned before, 406 buses. 2 of the operations, we have only the buses. Or going a little bit back, Bogota, Colombia decided to divide the transit operations in 2 parts. One the infrastructure and one the service. And they have like 2 players. The infrastructure they divided into buses and depots, and the operation of the buses in a second stage. So the first operation Bogota did, they separated depot from buses from operation, and we entered the second stage that we are the owners of the buses and the depots. We had to build up a depot for 195 buses. And because we are still thinking as IC vehicles, they ask many conditions to put in this operation to work as IC vehicles. So the most important thing for the city in that moment, when they were doing this contract, was you have to charge all the buses in 4 hours. And you need the buses to run with 260 kilometers, that's more or less 350 miles with full charge, and that has to work during the whole contract. So we need a lot of energy to put in the depot to make this work. And probably that's a mistake, because the electric vehicles can work in a different way, can charge in a different way, and we don't need so much energy to put these operations to work. So today we have a depot that we built with these conditions, with a lot of energy. It's like the energy for a city of, 1,500 people. That's only used for buses. and it's only used for buses to charge in 4 hours. They can charge during the whole day, but it's made to have full electricity for 4 hours. So that what's going to do is we are going to take a lot of energy from the grid. We are going to have problems selecting depots in different places because the grid is not enough, but we have to start thinking how we can do this in different ways. What happens if we have less batteries, buses with less weight, buses that can charge more during the day? Probably we'll have to need, I don't know, 10% more buses or something like that, but we will have operations that work differently. What happens if we have different charging points in the city because drivers cannot drive for the whole day? They have to change during the day, so while they stop, we can charge, and we can optimize the charging infrastructure. In this operation, we also did something that's interesting. We did all the charging infrastructure in a second floor. This was made more to optimize the spaces and to don't have any risk going through any charging station in a depot. So we have all the charging infrastructure in a second place, and we also have a system that's called sequential charging. So we have a big supercharger, we have dispensers, and we can charge, depending the number of buses that we are charging at the same time, we can charge in different amounts of energy. So that also helps us need less energy than a normal operation will need. So this is a process that we have been learning and been learning from the experience of other operations, but it works really well, and we can optimize the energy in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Andres. Emily, do you want to add anything to that?
Just making sure the mic's on. Yeah. I can add from the perspective of SEPTA, the transition and how we're electrifying our fleet has been a very thought-out process. We take our responsibility to provide services to transport our community very seriously, and so we want to make sure that we're minimizing the risk as we transition, because this is a very complex process, right? I think Andres hit on a lot of it. We have a variety of routes. We serve the city of Philadelphia, but then we also serve the suburbs. So our routes can vary from, 20 to 40 miles a day to 300 miles and go on the highway. So our buses have a lot of demand. We have some buses that have quite a lot of people that we carry, and we have to consider weight when it comes to electric vehicles. And so what we've done is as part of our broader strategic plan, we've taken the time to do a zero-emission bus evaluation. We don't need to transition our other modes because they're all running on electric already. The grid is not the greatest in Pennsylvania. We have a lot of gas on our grid, but we're also contributing to putting more renewable energy on our grid through solar farms that we've taken part in. We have 42 megawatts of solar farms right now and some solar panels. But with our buses, we have 9 depots. We run, we provide over 620,000 unlinked trips a day. So we really are a key mechanism for getting people to places. And so with our zero-emission bus, we've evaluated not only the routes, but our ability at our depot to provide the energy demand. We are looking at over $1 billion in upgrades for all 9 of our depots to get the energy demand that we need to provide charging infrastructure. And we're also looking at the way we organize our operations, which are really key to how we deploy our buses and think about it. And these are all things that I've learned in like the last 6 months, that just every time I go into a meeting, I'm like, oh, that's something I didn't realize we had to think about. But the way we transition our buses, so we run our buses for 15 years. We push them really hard. Industry standard is 12 years. And we run certain routes out of certain depots, and when we bring in 150 buses, we distribute them amongst the depots. But if we're going to do zero-emission buses, we're looking at fuel cell and electric. We can't have a mix at our depots. It has to be purely battery electric or purely fuel cell. So there's just a lot of layers that we're really working through right now, including partnering with our local energy company, because we know that as we go to charge our 1,400, 1,500 buses, the demand on the grid is going to be a challenge for us as well. So we're in the process of doing all of that and really being methodical and making sure that we're thinking through everything that we can to be able to provide this service.
Excellent, Emily. So this is a perfect segue from Crystal. We didn't plan it, but it just came out like that. So Crystal, anything that you want to add? What is the role of the local utility?
Well, sure, and that's a great question. And I'm not sure if this is on. Emily, you and Andres already mentioned. Switch this one out. This is better. You already mentioned the importance of working with your utility to plan. And, Florida is the second largest state in the country for electric vehicle adoption. And so Floridians are demanding that we help scale with EVs. And so we've been focused on this for a long time. I think that part of what is driving rampant EV adoption in Florida is the fact that residents have access to a really strong public charging network, which FPL has been investing in since 2019. We started with workplace charging and destination charging, downtown destination charging, and then we very quickly moved into sort of level 3 public DC fast charging solutions along Florida's turnpike, major interstates, and then other areas, urban areas, rural areas, because that has really built confidence of drivers that they can work an electric vehicle into the way that they like to move around the state. It's not unusual for me to leave my home in the morning and drive 300 miles to Jacksonville for a noon meeting and then drive back to South Florida by the end of the day. And so I need to feel confident that I can charge along the way. And so I think that public network has really been an important enabler for Floridians that want to drive electric. And so we've made those investments. We work with companies who make those investments because at the core of all of it is electricity. And Emily, you mentioned that your power grid maybe isn't quite ready for it and it's not clean. The good thing about the buses that you're deploying is they're 60% cleaner than fuel vehicles, than ICE vehicles, even with the dirtiest power. And in Florida, we're making a lot of investments. We're in the middle of the largest solar expansion we've ever seen as a state. We're building more solar than anyone else, and so our grid is really clean. So Floridians feel really good about driving electric vehicles. And then as we think about really scaling, it takes partnerships. And so, as we think about working with our school districts and our counties and our airports and our ports, all of whom I've spoken with just today, because everybody's here today, I think, they're all interested in electrifying their fleets. And so what are those solutions, and how can the utility provide the infrastructure maybe, which we do, and then also make sure that the energy is sufficient and there. We plan on a 10-year cycle, so every year we update our 10-year site plan and we take all of the load that we would expect from electric vehicles and other electrification efforts into our plan. So we're already building out the infrastructure that we're going to need to meet the next decade's needs. As electric vehicles really scale, we're going to be ready for that.
Thank you, Crystal. And definitely, last but not least, Alejandro, anything that you want to add?
Sure, I'll be quick after all of these amazing responses. I think there is a little to add to that, but I think it is important. The question is about how can we have exponential and massive growth and expansion, particularly for the EV charging network. So I think it is important to put in perspective from recent industry reports that as of today, there are 128,000 public charging points in the US. That number, that figure is equivalent to the number of gas stations. And people usually have a tendency to believe that gas stations are everywhere, and while charging stations are nowhere to be found. And it's actually, the number is equivalent. Of course, each one of these gas stations has multiple nozzles, in the average of 5, I would say. But the charging infrastructure is expanding and growing between 30 and 40% year over year. That has been the rate of growth over the last 5 years, and that is going to accelerate in the upcoming 5 years. So what we can see here is that between the next 4 to 5 years, there will be an equivalent number of charging ports than gas nozzles or pumps. So that is a very important figure here to keep in mind how rapid and how massive and exponential is the expansion of the charging infrastructure.
Thank you, Alejandro. And I think I didn't heard mentioning that electric vehicles are much more efficient than the regular combustion engine vehicles. So even though we are thinking about the grid and all these other things, I think it is important to think about that we are started with a better product. But even though we start with a better product, there are many challenges in this transition, right? And many of them have had experience. So, Emily, can you tell us a little bit about your challenges?
Certainly. You always ask a public employee to talk about their challenges, and we're happy to do that. I'm going to be the negative Nelly. There's a handful. I'll just keep it to a limited number. One is the scale of the transition that we have to go through. It's 1,500 buses. That's approximately 10 years worth of buying buses. We trade them out at 150, at 150 buses per year, right? So if we start today, we're still not fully transitioned until 2033, and we're looking at our first purchase being in 2027 at the earliest, and that's after we do several pilots and whatnot. And then that's also in addition to needing to upgrade all of our facilities to the adequate infrastructure, to train our operators, to adjust our routes as needed, to educate the community. There's just a lot of things that at a scale of transitioning your whole fleet need to happen, and it needs to act in a coordinated way, and I think coordination is the key there. It's just very difficult to be fully coordinated on stuff like this. Our mandate as a state-enabled authority is that we provide services not only in terms of transportation, but when there are emergencies. We are the vehicles that our firefighters sit in to stay cool in the summer and warm in the winter. We are the vehicles that will be transporting people out of the city if there's an emergency of some sort. We are critical to our city's emergency response. If we're doing battery electric, and this is a pushback I get a lot, our generators right now are diesel driven, so can battery electric buses sustain for long enough to provide those services to our emergency response individuals or to handle an emergency in the city? And I know you have a great solution to that. The economies of scale. Right now, every transportation authority is experiencing a drop in ridership. We're at 60% of our ridership pre-COVID times, right? So what that means is prior to COVID, we were providing over 1 million unlinked trips per day. We're now doing 620,000. And what that means is our revenue is drastically down. So we have to be creative about where we're pulling revenue from and start to think about how can we buy this very expensive product and the accoutrement that have to go with it, right? While we're suffering from reduced financials, while we're also anticipating the drop-off of COVID funding in the next year. So fiscal cliff is like the buzzword du jour in my office. I feel like I need to put a dollar jar. It's like a swear jar. But for every time somebody says fiscal cliff, you have to put $1 in. So dealing with that. And then the biggest thing right now, I think I can talk about it somewhat because it was in the news, but we have 25 electric buses. We've had them for 6 years. We were some of the first adopters of purchasing electric buses. We had some issues with them, so they've been offline for a number of years. We recently went to bring one back online, and we had a fire. And it was a big deal. It took a day to put out. It was a very big concern for us. It was one of our most dense districts that it happened at, fully surrounded by a community. And so the safety concerns that come along with storing lithium batteries internally and thinking about that is another challenge that we're really trying to work through. And I think there are some solutions out there, but it seems like every transportation authority is kind of dealing with how do you ensure that these vehicles are safe when they're stored and while you're driving them.
Well, that's a comprehensive list. Anybody else wants to add anything to the challenges bucket? Are we ready to move? Okay, so now that we heard the challenges, what are the solutions? And let's start with Alejandro.
Well, thanks for the question. Yeah, there are multiple challenges when we are planning to deploy a network of charging stations. Perhaps the first one that comes to everybody's mind is, the cost of it, like the upfront and the running and the operational cost. So in order to present some solution, we developed this concept of and implement the concept of electric vehicle charging as a service, providing enough funds and capital, and also removing all the upfront cost and barriers and operational cost for the entire charging solution. With that idea in mind, which is becoming quite popular here in the state of Florida with both the public and the private sector, we have seen a tremendous growth over the last 6 years. And not only that, but this concept and this solution also allow these municipalities, corporations, and private enterprises also to generate carbon credit income. So part of the benefits and the profits from running the charging operations are being passed on to the host property, whether it is a city, a municipality. So that's also one very effective way to remove or to provide a solution to the first challenge. Perhaps the second most important challenge and question is, all right, let's say that a city that, for example, have access to grant money or funds or private investment. The next question is where to deploy these charging units and how many and what is the right balance. So we have developed an algorithm that uses data from urban development, from traffic patterns, and from new electric vehicle registration that allow us to identify what are the potential areas that will benefit the most from providing a charging solution. And also, after you identify these areas, then provide the right mix of the right quantity of charging stations and the right mix between whether these are level 2, DC, or any other type of charging solution. So that is very important because if you stick to the correct deployment strategy, then you can generate a business model that is sustainable, that generates profits over the long term, and is scalable. And that's perhaps one very healthy and sustainable way to expand the business. And another, it sounds like a little, but it's still a challenge, is to prevent something that we call in the industry icing, which is when a regular car or an internal combustion engine vehicle parks and blocks in a space that has been designated for EV charging only. So one of the solutions, and the Mayor Levin Cava and the county has presented as a leading in this sense and trying to present a solution that costs $0 but is quite effective, is to create an ordinance that make it illegal. And that's important. Every city must make it illegal because after all the effort and resources and time that takes to develop and activate a charging point, it is a shame that some people simply block it and prevent others who need to charge from the access to get to these charging stations. So making it like creating that ordinance to make it illegal or making it like a parking, non-moving violation, it is essential for the effectiveness of the entire solution.
Well, Alejandro gave us almost a solution for every problem, but do we have any problem remaining or a solution that he didn't address? Okay, Andres, go ahead.
I want to complement what Alejandro was saying, and that's basically the answer, but we have to work all together. If we don't work all together, we are not going to give the right solution. So if you sit here, probably Crystal wants to sell more energy, Emily wants more routes and more services to provide to the people. I want to put more buses and more charging infrastructure. Alejandro wants to put more charging infrastructure on more vehicles getting there. But if it's not all working together, it doesn't work. So the answer is we have to work together. We have to put the charging to talk to the buses, to talk to the city, to talk to the energy company. And if they don't talk all together, it doesn't work well. So we need to be all aligned with the same view, working to the same side, not trying to do like independent revenues for each one.
Awesome, and that's an excellent segue for the next call. So what are some solutions when you need to repower your vehicle during emergency situations? Here in Florida, we have hurricanes, and now we have supercells or rain bombs, and I'm sure everybody has their own natural issue. So, Crystal, what can we do?
Thanks for that, Patricia. And you're right. Here in South Florida, we are no stranger to challenging situations. Well, that's one of the things that we really started thinking through as we built out this public and very robust charging network, as we're making sure that our customers who want to charge at home have a charger in their garage and are able to charge at home, as we work with our municipalities and other partners to help them electrify their fleet. What happens when the grid is offline? Now you've got a situation where energy is your source of powering your vehicle. And so we wanted to make sure that our customers felt comfortable no matter what situation was presented to them. And so hopefully some of you all got to see our solution as you walked in this morning. It's a very large blue and green and white trailer. We call it our mobile electric vehicle charging trailer that's right outside the front door. If you didn't get to see it, please go check it out. That has been about 2 years in the making, and we are just now unveiling it in time for the 2023 active tropical season, we'll call it, so that Floridians feel comfortable if they need to evacuate the state, or if they do live in a community that happens to be impacted by one of these natural weather events that Patricia talked about, we're able to take the charging trailer into that community and leave it for a period of time so that vehicles can repower, perhaps at times when even their homes don't have power. And we think that if we're looking in the future, and I think that's what we're supposed to do here at CoMotion, eventually when bidirectional charging is more mainstream, they may be able to charge their vehicle up in our mobile trailer, drive it back home, and power their home as a backup generator. So, these are solutions that we're thinking about as we're recognizing that Floridians are driving more and more EVs. The charging trailer that's out there, it is one of a pair. The second is on its way to us as we speak. Can charge 6 vehicles at a time and can deliver enough power to replenish up to 4,000 miles before the batteries in the trailer need to be recharged. And so we're really excited to learn. We also, Emily, pilot things, and this is a pilot for us to be able to learn how to best deploy this technology and how then to think about scaling it as we go into a future where 10% of the cars are on the road are electric and 50% of the cars on the road are electric. We want to make sure that we're ready for that.
Thank you, Crystal. Anybody else wants to address that? Alejandro had some additional insights. Go
First
ahead.
of all, congratulations, Crystal. I think that this charging a trailer is a great idea and a great solution, particularly to be, placed at strategic evacuating routes during the storms. So thank you for that. That's a great initiative. And about, what happens during the storms, there is the common concern, what happens if you drive electric and suddenly we run out of power. I can tell you this, that we have evacuated and our charging network has survived Irma in 2017, Michael in 18, Ian last year. And, if you're planning your deployment strategy, you're trying to stick to higher ground and areas that are not prone to flooding. And at the same time, I have to admit we have been lucky. All of our stations are in one piece after surviving these hurricanes. But it's also important. This is what I have seen while we are evacuating due to storms. I see mile-long lines of people waiting to pump gas at their vehicles. I've never seen a line for people waiting to charge. So actually, what I've seen is the opposite. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we have a kind of a gas shortage just to flooding event up in Port Everglades and Broward. So I've seen a lot of people doing line to fuel vehicles, not to charge. And another, policy that we implement for when we have, when it is imminent that a storm is coming, that we offered free charging the week prior to the arrival of the storm, and all free charging for the week after. That's to facilitate, all the evacuation plans of all the customers and the people who are charging. So that's also a very nice gesture that people appreciate, and also is an additional help for people to contribute with the evacuation plan during the storms.
Awesome, Alejandro. Thank you. So the last question that I'm going to ask before turning to everybody else is, how do we bring low-income residents to share into the electrification movement? A lot of people is thinking like electric vehicles are too expensive. Now they have come down in price, and definitely with the incentives that we have at the federal government is making the math much better. But I think that that's a concern that many have. How do we bring those low-income people? How do we make them accessible so they can have chargers, or they can have access to them? So I don't know who wants to start. Andres, go ahead.
Yeah, probably part of the solution is the charging infrastructure and the charging infrastructure in your house. So many people here in the U.S. live in a house and they have the charging infrastructure in their house and they have their own charging station. But if you live in a condo, it's really difficult to have one charging station for each one of the spaces you have in your house. So if you start having, I don't know, charging stations in the condos that can be used by many vehicles, you can optimize the use of the charging infrastructure. And you don't have to start calling the utility company, please come to my condo and you have to put here 300 chargers, because nobody likes to do that.
Call it community charging. Yeah. It's to be shared in the community. It works very, very well. That's a good solution for this case.
If I can chime in, I'm going to put on two hats. Prior to my role at SEPTA, I was the Smart Cities Director for the City of Philadelphia, and this was something we were constantly dealing with, is how do you deploy EV charging in the public space? And there's a couple layers to this as well. One is in Philadelphia. Has anybody here ever been to Philadelphia? Okay. Oh, wow. That's lovely. Usually it's not that many. Then you'll know parking is a challenge in our city. We can't even get our streets clean because people refuse to move their parking spot because they don't want to lose it, kind of challenge. And so we actually had a pilot where we deployed EV charging, and it ended up basically privatizing public parking. And so we had to stop it for the time being and look into it. We still have not come up with a solution, mind you, but that's kind of one of those challenges, again, to deploying it. The other thing about Philadelphia is we are the largest, poorest city. 25% of our population lives at or below federal poverty level, which means they're making under $25,000 a year. So when you're deploying EV infrastructure, I think a lot of times the inclination is to put it where the cars are and not think about 5-10 years down the line where it will be needed. And creating that divide that already exists between the low-income communities and the more higher socioeconomic communities, right? And so I think it's really important that as we are all considering deploying these, that we take into consideration how do we deploy it into those communities as well, whether it's having the infrastructure ready to kind of essentially plug in the EV charger at the time. So is it policies in terms of buildings that come basically EV charging infrastructure ready? Is it going to recreation centers or faith-based community centers where we know a lot of the times these communities convene. So those are some challenges. And then I would say from the SEPTA side, we have to transition our fleet. It's kind of coming from the federal government. We know it's better for the quality of life of our residents. We have a lot of things going for Philly. We have a lot of things not going for Philly. We have one of the highest rates of asthma in our communities, right? So we know that particulate and what we're emitting from our buses can really contribute to that. And what we've tried to do, and we're working really hard on, is the education around it, right? I think a lot of people disassociate themselves from the impact of their commute and how they're getting places to the impact on the quality of life and the zip code that you grow up in. And so we're really actively working to say, we're going to transition, but we want you to be a part of this transition. We want you to understand what this means for your community and educate them on why it's better to take public transportation. You have a third of the carbon footprint of anybody driving a car, a single occupancy vehicle, if you take a SEPTA bus. Those kind of things have been really key in how we engage the community in this.
Crystal, do you want to add anything else?
I think there have been some really wonderful points made on this stage, and I agree, Emily, with your point about education. And I think education broadly, just having access to what the vehicles look like and feel, how touching and feeling them. It's hard to go to a dealership sometimes and have an experience. And so, my team spends a lot of time doing ride and drive events, and we've targeted some very low income areas or maybe less obvious areas to take that technology and let people experience it. We're working with a number of our school districts across the state right now that plan to transport their children in these electric school buses, which is across all demographics, but oftentimes students who are riding school buses happen to be a little further away from school, and so have those different demographics. And I'll just mention too that another pilot we're working on that I'm really excited to see come off the ground is an integrated electric school bus microgrid solution for 2 lower income schools just north of here in Broward County that function as special needs and other types of hurricane shelters. So when residents need to evacuate, they go to these schools and are safe during a storm. can we power them with sustainable energy from the battery of the school buses that the community is adopting? And those were specifically chosen to be in those neighborhoods to add value and bring an amenity to those lower income areas and allow them to have an experience that maybe they wouldn't otherwise.
Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody has a lot of questions. I myself have a lot of questions, but anybody that would like to ask our panelists questions, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ann Shu. I'm CEO and co-founder of Electro-Tempo. We're a software company focused on EV charging network planning. And we're more focused on the commercial fleet side of things. So I wanted to ask, we've talked a lot about light-duty vehicles and then bus fleets. What's the panel's take on like massive scale commercial truck fleet electrification, the impact that it's going to have on the grid, and how a utility company is planning to address that?
So I guess I'll take that one since I'm the utility company. You guys can certainly, you will definitely have some experience around that. From our standpoint, thinking about the grid, we are talking to all the commercial fleets that are in our customer base and trying to understand their needs. And I think right now they all have very different approaches to how they'd like to repower those vehicles, and they use their vehicles very differently. So the important thing that we're thinking about is helping our commercial fleets right-size their charging infrastructure so that they're not putting in a bank of level 3 DC fast chargers that are creating a gigantic load on the grid. If they can pull back into a depot at the end of the day and have 6 to 8 hours to recharge on, level 2 more traditional types of chargers. So from the utility standpoint, for us, it's really important that we work with those fleets to make sure they're right-sizing the equipment, that they have the equipment that they need, that the power is where they need it and that it's available, but that it's not overly built out to the point where it's putting extra stress on the grid.
Yeah, in terms of vehicles, the buses are the perfect asset to electrify. They go for 10, 15 years. They park all days in the same part. They don't leave the city, so they are perfect. And in terms of total cost of ownership, they work perfectly. Then if you move to commercial vehicles, what we see now is that the offering commercial vehicles is very low. If you go out to try to get distribution vehicles or last mile distribution, the offer is very low, and they are starting to move to that. But in terms of total cost or total TCO, it doesn't work so well. If you go to the vehicles that people here use, the one that has an electric vehicle is because he is very good with the environment, but he's not doing a business. It's not a good deal to do, or you have a tax advantage or no. But that movement and the commercial vehicles are going to use, 20 or 30% more energy than the buses today, or what the buses are going to use. And today, 50% of the buses in the world, basically by China, are electric, are sold are electric, but in trucks, only like 3% of the trucks are electric. So what's coming is really big.
There are some very stringent mandates coming through. First from, obviously here we're in Florida, but the California Air Resources Board just adopted the Advanced Clean Fleets Rule, which requires that all new last mile delivery trucks will start to transition to zero emissions starting next year. So the pressure is on, and that's why I wanted to see everybody's idea on how we make that happen.
Thank you. And we are going to transition. Thank you for your question. They will be available after the panel to continue the conversation. Any other questions? Of course.
Hi, I'm Chris Fruhoff, co-founder of a product development firm specializing in e-mobility products. And we've noticed that a lot of companies have tried to crack the nut of battery swaps. And I know one of the big challenges there is just compatibility of across different vehicles. It seems like there's maybe an opportunity in fleet of buses, et cetera, to be able to standardize on certain battery swap methods. I'm curious if you see that as something that's coming in the future?
That's a difficult question.
No, it's not so difficult, unfortunately. We have a sister company called Sun Mobility in India that does battery swapping, basically for three-wheelers. That's a really big business in India, and they have, I don't know, 2-3 million three-wheelers in India. And it works very well because the battery is standard. We have been trying to develop a bus for battery swapping, and the difficult part is you have to have all the structure the same for all the buses, or you can only work with one brand. So that's the difficult part. And it's really interesting. It will really help everybody, but you have to standardize the battery and the system that will change the battery of the bus and put the battery swapping.
Thank you, Andres, for addressing that very difficult question. I think this is going to be our last question of the panel.
Thank you. Luis Paul from OBE Power. I have a question. As we know, vehicle to grid and that technology, it's coming fast in the marketplace. How do you see utilities, and especially FPL, putting together programs on demand response and those kind of things in the coming future, so we can help as well to manage the volatility of the grid and the smart grids coming up?
Sure. I think these are early days, right, on vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, vehicle to X. V to X is what we're looking at, and that's vehicle to everything. So I think the technology is developing quickly. I think that in Florida, it remains to be seen how we will leverage it. We are working on a couple of pilots right now with some large OEMs to understand the impact on our grid and the true value of that energy that could be put back into the grid, and whether it becomes a distributed resource that's managed through a virtual power plant construct or even a virtual microgrid construct, or whether people really are just going to utilize that as a backup generator for their homes during an emergency situation. We're learning a lot about that. We're learning a lot about the parameters that need to be put on a program like that, because nobody's going to want you to use their entire battery capacity for grid power, because if they need to get in the vehicle and drive, they're going to want to have that. And so how do you put those parameters around? Is it 70%? Is it 60%? What is the sweet spot around how much of the battery the utility can tap in? How do we use it for peak shaving? There are a lot of questions, I think, that are being discussed in the utility space right now, and there are a number of pilots across the country to address that. But really, we like to learn from our customers, and so it's important, and we're right now in the discovery phase of how do our customers view V to X, V to G, what are the demand side management opportunities that they're interested in that can also benefit the utility. So I would say watch for that over the next bit, but it really is new developing technology that I would say we don't have a view on fully yet.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to give an opportunity. I think we only have like less than 3 minutes, so 30 seconds each. What are your closing thoughts for today? Do we want to start with Alejandro?
Yes, sure. Perhaps one of a very important closing is a very interesting and dynamic conversation we are having with certain cities and municipalities about, making sure that no neighborhood is left behind when it comes to charging solution. And out of all the programs or portfolio of grant opportunities, one of them is the CFI, that is for the charging and fueling infrastructure grant. That it is important that certain areas that qualify as disadvantaged areas as per the census tract. So when a city considers combining that CFI grant with a charging as a service solution, the reality is that they can multiply the number of locations that qualify for charging points, and they can maximize the impact. So that's a very effective way for cities and municipalities to make sure that they are actually deploying a large amount of charging stations, and no neighborhood is being in disadvantaged situations is left behind.
Thank you, Alejandro. Andres?
Thanks. Basically, the future is electric, and mobility will be 30% of that future. So thanks for being here and for hearing everything that has to do with electromobility.
Awesome. Emily?
I will end on a positive note. I just, I get on my daily work, I get bogged down in the details, but when I have the opportunity like this conference to pull up my head and really see all the great stuff that's happening, I'm very much empowered and excited for what the future holds. And it's amazing the amount of knowledge that's going towards this. So I just thank all of you for helping empower me and give me energy to go back and continue to work on this.
Crystal.
So to mimic Andres, maybe the future is electric. Electrification is coming. It's coming quickly. If you live in Florida, you can feel really good about driving an electric vehicle because your local utility is thinking about holistic charging solutions. If you don't live in Florida, but you are part of a municipality or public entity that can work with your utility, this is a good example of services and ways that you can work with your utility, because at the core of all of this is electricity. So make sure that you're talking to your utility and engaging them in your future plans.
Thank you so much to everybody here. Please welcome them with a very good round of applause. Appreciate it.